You're on.
Thank you. Well, as the dominant species worldwide, it's often assumed that man is the very pinnacle of evolution. And yet in reality, we have lost many very useful traits which come very naturally to rather more primitive species. The salamander, for instance, is exquisitely adapted to violent conflict with potential predators. If the salamander is to lose either its tail or a forelimb during combat, it is able to regenerate the entire missing appendage. Now just imagine if we were able to recapture that ability to regenerate our own tissues. How would that transform the world in the 21st century? Well, one of the major issues which faces medicine today is the aging nature of the population, as we've already heard, in fact, from Sarah Harper. So while antibiotics has significantly decreased mortality from infectious disease, we are beginning to see, nevertheless, this rising tide of chronic and degenerative diseases, which are, in fact, the diseases of old age. By 2050, 1/3 of China's population will, in fact, be classed senior citizens and will therefore be vulnerable to diseases such as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Now, many of these diseases could actually be cured by the replacement of just a single cell type. If we could regenerate those cells like the salamander, we would quite literally transform modern medicine. Now, stem cells have, of course, been entrusted with this remit of rejuvenating tissues. They are, in fact, the very building blocks from which all tissues are ultimately constructed. They are unique in that they will generate daughter cells which are far more specialized than themselves and which then perform all of the functions of the tissue. Now, these so-called adult stem cells are found within each and every one of our tissues. In fact, we now know that even the brain harbors a population of so-called neural stem cells within the subventricular zone, and these give rise both to neurons and all the supporting cell types of the central nervous system. And in fact, it's possible to isolate some of these adult stem cells and to maintain them within a laboratory setting. And yet, in fact, their usefulness for medicine is very limited. These cells are very difficult to access. They have very limited viability in vitro, and in fact will generate only a handful of different cell types. But in fact, major advances in the whole field of stem cell biology, first pioneered in fact by Japanese scientists, have revolutionized the way in which we view regenerative medicine. It's now possible, for instance, to take just a few cells from a patient and to transform or reprogram them back to a stem cell state by the introduction of as few as 3 distinct genes. And the resulting cells can be distinguished from adult stem cells because they resemble far more closely the stem cells found within the early embryo, the so-called embryonic stem cells. These, in fact, give rise to the entire fetus and are said to be pluripotent. That means they produce each and every one of the cell types that make up the human body. And in fact, when these are extracted, they maintain their pluripotency in vitro and will produce a whole range of different cell types, from beating cardiac muscle through to neurons, perhaps even all the cell types that make up the immune system of the adult. And importantly, it's possible to take some of these cells and to administer these in animal models of human disease. And this has been done very successfully. For instance, dopaminergic neurons have been used to cure many of the symptoms of Parkinson's disease in monkeys. And the replacement of damaged cardiac muscle in pigs has been very effective in preventing some of the effects of myocardial infarction or heart attack. And of course, the hope is that one day we may be able to use a very similar approach to cure a whole range of human diseases. And earlier this year, approval was given to Geron Corporation to conduct the first ever clinical trials for the treatment of spinal cord injury using human embryonic stem cells. Now, although embryonic stem cells obviously have an enormous amount of potential therapeutically, they carry an enormous amount of ethical baggage because their isolation requires the destruction of the embryo itself. Now, although embryos are only used that are surplus to requirements in fertility clinics, nevertheless, their use raises very important moral questions for some people. But the advent of induced pluripotent stem cells taken direct from an individual and reprogrammed back to a stem cell state offers all of the advantages of embryonic stem cells, but without the destruction of human embryos. And this, of course, paves the way for personalized medicines aimed at an individual's needs. Now, although there's an enormous amount which needs to be done before this could possibly impact the clinic, there is nevertheless real hope that regenerative medicine may offer a solution to this advancing tide of chronic and degenerative diseases. What comes naturally to a salamander may one day be natural for all of us as well. Thank you.